Did you imagine that this virus would still, as we are here today, be killing 200 to 300 people a day?
No.
Did you imagine, the level of cases, and what is your outlook for the future of this virus as you look in the next several years?
No, I did not imagine that. I don't think any of my colleagues imagined that we would see a 3-year saga of suffering and death and 1 million Americans losing their lives. The thing that was most disturbing is something I referred to an answer to one of the other questions, was the continuation of multiple variants evolving over time, completely unlike something like measles. And that's the reason why I gave the measles comparison. Where I think we're going is that sooner or later, and I hope it's sooner, we're going to equilibrate to a low level when there's enough background cross protection that unless we get a completely far way out different variant, we're likely going to see a continued lowering and lowering. Maybe we're going to see blips at winter and stuff, but hopefully it gets down. The message that Dr. Jha and I are trying to get to you today is that we can make that happen much sooner by vaccinating and by keeping updating on your booster. It's just really as simple as that. We're going to get there. We can get there with less suffering if we use the interventions that we have. If you want to let nature take its course, we're ultimately going to get there, but we're going to lose a lot more people than we need to.
Can I just add one more quick thing to that? I mean, look, there are hundreds of thousands of Americans who have died this year because people were under-vaccinated, people did not get people weren't boosted. And it is not blaming the people who died, it is blaming the fact that we still have a lot of people out there spreading misinformation, undermining people's confidence in vaccines. There was a paper out last week that showed that death numbers in many European countries were much lower because their booster rates are much higher. So the key point here is, at this point, we can prevent nearly every death in America from COVID. But we can't see this as like a horse race of let's get an anti-vaxxer and let's get we know what the evidence is. The science on this is crystal clear. People get their booster. If you get infected, the chances you're going to end up super sick in the hospital is exceedingly low. That's the message. People need to get their updated vaccine.
The administration has requested $10 billion in this lame duck session for the urgent COVID needs that still remain. That's less than half of what you had even requested during the summer.
Yep.
Is that sufficient in your mind to meet these needs, not just to deal with COVID, but the strains on the hospital system we're seeing from flu, from RSV, and at a time when you're making these kinds of urgent requests and warnings, is it undercut at all by some of the rhetoric we've been hearing, even from the president? He talked about this Thanksgiving being different than what we've seen in the past, and just 2 months ago he talked about this COVID crisis being over as we know it.
So you're absolutely right. We've asked for $10 billion, I think 9.7 or something, but about $10 billion. It is less than what we had requested back in March, and that's because we have pulled resources from other things. I've talked to you about this from this podium. The really critical other public health needs that we have pulled resources from to buy vaccines, to buy treatments. Even the resources we're announcing today are from other really important programs. But that $10 billion is now critical. It is to make sure that we do have enough vaccines and treatments and tests to get Americans to a point where eventually, as this response changes and we more normalize vaccine treatment purchases through the regular health system, we want to make sure that we do that in an orderly way. We want to make sure that we got uninsured and underinsured Americans covered. So we obviously need resources for that. What you heard from Dr. Fauci is we are at a point where this virus continues to evolve very, very rapidly. And we updated the vaccines. They are working great right now. But the virus will continue to evolve, and at some point down the road next year, we're going to have to update the vaccines again. The truth is that for the long-run management of this virus, we need variant-resistant vaccines. We need vaccines that prevent transmission. What you have seen is China make a very large investment in mucosal vaccines because they understand that that's how you deal with respiratory viruses. America is falling behind on this really important technology. A major part of our request is for funding for public-private partnerships to move those kinds of technologies forward, to move a next generation of treatments forward. So we are trying to be prudent, obviously, in requesting resources that we think are absolutely essential and necessary. And all I can say is Congress needs to do its job and step up and protect the American people.